and welcome back to the Aetherdrift limited set review. In this video I'll be going over the white cards and how good I think they will be in the format with a focus around draft. So I use 5 tiers. It's maybe a little different than some other people's set reviews. Tier 1 is good, Tier 5 is bad. This, nice information slide here provides you with all the information you'll need to understand what the tiers mean, kind of. And if you like set reviews like this and other limited content, feel free to subscribe as well. And we're going to get things started with Air Response Unit. 2 and a white for a 3/3 vehicle with flying and vigilance, and it is crew 1. And so, we're right into it, right? A lot of vehicles in the set, all that good stuff. And this is quite solid. 3-mana 3/3 flying vigilance crew 1. You would think in a normal set that would be a great card. I do think, and I originally had this card rated in Tier 2, but I've since moved it down. There's just enough ways to interact with this. There's Lightning Strike, you have the other red. Deal 3, everything in the set hits vehicles, there's other artifact stuff. I just don't think this is, super premium, this type of, doesn't ETB and do anything, basically just a vehicle. There's better things that do this. This is still a decent card. You're still going to play it. I think you're going to play this in the majority of your decks. I don't really imagine not playing it, but and it does. The vigilance is actually pretty significant here, right? Getting Beetle block, but you do need 2 things to crew it, right? That is you do need to have that, and so I cautious about where I'm doing vehicles, because you can have too many of them at times. Although they've made some accommodations in the set to help prevent that. Like this, for example, a Clarion, Alacrian Armory. 3 and a white for an artifact. Creatures you control get +0/+1 and have vigilance. At the beginning of combat on your turn, choose up to 1 target mount or vehicle you control. Until end of turn, that permanent becomes saddled if it's a mount and becomes an artifact creature if it's a vehicle. So this is a very interesting card. The thing about it that obviously I am not going to like, and a lot of people aren't going to like, doesn't really have a lot of board impact by itself. Yes, you're getting the +0/+1. Those effects tend to not be very good. They tend to end up being a little overcosted. But giving all your creatures vigilance is nice. There's diminishing returns to a certain extent because, it doesn't really make your attacks any better. +0/+1 doesn't really make your attacks any better. It just turns things that would have been trades into free attacks, which sometimes is an improvement, but a lot of times kind of doesn't matter too much. The real thing about this is it's crewing your vehicles for you. So vehicles with high crew costs, mounts with high saddle costs, those type of things. That's really where you're getting value out of this. And I do think there is value to be had there. That is something that I do think you want. I don't think it's super premium or anything. It's one of those cards. This is a card I could see being much better than I've rated it, and also I could see being completely unplayable. If the format is really fast, it is going to be could potentially be bad, or it's really good because you have the vigilance and that actually helps you win a race. So a lot of ways this could go. I could see a world where deck composition just doesn't in really bad decks. This card is good, so it might not actually this is a really good card in the it'll salvage a deck that's terrible, but it's not gonna make a deck that's great better. Because if you don't draw this, you still need to be able to crew your vehicles, and so that's kind of the is it a if I draw this, my deck functions, and I don't draw it, I lose. Those cards tend to be bad. You tend to not want to play those cards. Smoky Lounge is kind of a good example of that from Duskmourn, where that room payoff, your deck was great if you drew it, and if you didn't draw it, your deck kind of sucked. And this is kind of this sort of gives off similar vibes to a certain extent. So I've kind of cautiously put it in Tier 3. Kind of a cop-out grade, as I've been known to do from time to time, but Because there's obvious upside here and there's obvious downside here. So I've just kind of ended up putting it right in the middle. Basri, tomorrow's champion. Single white mana for a 2/1. You can pay white and tap and exert it to create a 1/1 cat creature token with lifelink, and you can cycle it for 2 and a white. When you cycle this card, cats you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Not a ton of cats in this set, so that doesn't really matter all that much. But yeah, I mean, just the creature is great, and the fact that you can cycle your 1-drop is also something that I'm quite fond of. Cycling for 3 is not the best, but if you don't want a 1-mana 2/1, you probably do want, to pay 3 mana to draw a new card. That is probably the thing is like I don't know how often you're even going to be cycling this, because on like turn 6, like yeah, you probably cycle this in the late game. I mean, it is still just like making a bunch of tokens that can crew stuff, like throughout the relevance, like the later game. I just can't really see a scenario where this is ever bad in any spot. So I've put it in tier 1. I would be really happy to take this. Pack 1, pick 1. It's just going to go in any white deck, and it's going to be very good there. Brightfield Glider. Single white mana for a 1/1 with Vigilance. When this creature attacks while saddled, it gets +1/+2 and gains flying until end of turn, and it has saddle for 3. So saddle 3 looks pretty daunting, but there's a lot of support for it, including several 2-mana 3/1s. Mostly at uncommon, but there's several 2-mana 3/1s that can crew this on turn 2. So there's going to be a lot of games where you play this on 1. On turn 2, you go play a 3/1, saddle this, get in for 2, and it still has Vigilance. It's not bad. And like you're getting it for 2 damage, and then you can still like trade it off with their 1-drop potentially, or you can still use it to crew a vehicle on your opponent's turn because it has Vigilance. So this is just a lot of like little things this does that I kind of like. The problem obviously is just it's a 1-mana 1/1 with Vigilance, and that's not a good card. But I think just Mount as a type is kind of a thing that matters. Specifically green-white. It's kind of a deck that wants this. It's possible this card just ends up being really bad. I'm not putting any type of premium on it, but I do think you would play this in a lot of there's a lot of spots I think you'd want this. Green-white is a spot I think you'd probably maybe want one of these. Red-white I could see this working. I don't really think blue-white or black-white are super interested in these. Although black-white does care about max speed, and this is a really good speed enabler. So you could say black-white maybe it does actually want this. Blue-white I don't think at all, but yeah, I think that a card that fits in maybe 3 of the 4 2-color pairs. That's something. And I think it'll show up. Brightfield Mustang. 3 and a blue for 3 and a blue. 3 and a white. I was distracted by the blue sword or whatever that is. 3/3. When this creature it's a mount. When it attacks while saddled, untap it and put a +1/+1 counter on it, and you saddle it for 1. This is just a no. 4 mana. Hill Giants are just not you just can't do it. There's deal 3s at 2. It just never obviously when it gets to attack, it attacks as a 4/4 with essentially Vigilance, but that's not even that good. If that was the card, it wouldn't be that good. So yeah, you'd really have to be getting a lot of legs out of it being a mount, and I don't think I'm ever gonna play this card. Broadcast Rambler. 4 and a white for a 5/4 vehicle. When this vehicle enters, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying, and it has crew 1. I like this vehicle quite a bit. It's paying the 5-drop tax by being put in tier 3 because obviously you don't want to drive too many 5-drops, but it's a very good 5-drop. I could see it moving up to tier 2 very early into the format. It makes something that crews itself, which you can't say for most of the vehicles in the set that they can crew themselves, and this actually can. So that's actually something that is unique. But again, 5-drops, not at a premium in modern Magic the Gathering in general. So it's a good card in the 5-drop slot, but the 5-drop slot is not a slot that I am necessarily in desperate need for stuff. But I do think this is very strong, and it it sure could be, one of the more winning cards at common and white. I would not surprise me if this is white's second best common, just because it is a good rate. Bulwark Ox. 1 and a white for a 2/2 Ox mount. Whenever this creature attacks while saddled, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. You can sacrifice this creature. Creatures you control with counters on them gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, and it saddles for 1. So this attacks as a 3/3 if you saddle it if you want to. It's a good 2-drop. It has other utility like protecting your stuff. This just seems really annoying. Again, you would play this in any white deck. It's going to be a strong card in any white deck. As a result, it goes in tier 1. Is it gonna win at tier 1 rates? Maybe not, but I'm gonna draft pack 1, pick 1. You're gonna draft it, take this every time, pretty much. Not in the play booster era so much anymore, but in the old era, you would have been taking it pretty much every single time. And it's a card that is going to be very strong. Canyon Vaulter, 1 and a white for a 3/1. When this creature saddles a mount or cruises a vehicle during your main phase, that mount or vehicle gains flying until end of turn. This matters more for mounts. Actually, a lot of the vehicles kind of already have evasion. There's a lot of vehicles with evasion in the set. And giving something flying is really good. It is. The thing that I don't like is that it's just a 2-mana 3/1. It's a 2-mana 3/1, and without any, it's not really doing a ton on turn 2, and it doesn't block super well. It does crew a bunch of things. It's going to be a solid 2-drop. You're going to always be happy to have it, but I don't think it's premium. I don't think you are actively, I don't think you're going to be upset about not having this, basically, is kind of my take about this card. And as a result, I put it in tier 3 instead of tier 2. Cloud Spire Captain. 2 and a white for a 2/3. Mounts and vehicles you control get +1/+1. This creature saddles, mounts, and cruise vehicles as though its power were 2 greater. This I like more. One, because it's a lord, right? So for mounts, this is, I think, a better card for mounts because the mounts are creatures all the time, and you can, you're getting the value always as opposed to having to crew something, but it works with vehicles too. It's good. It has immediate impact. It can crew up to crew 4, and yeah, I like this. I like this in pretty much any white deck, I would think. Yeah, I would assume so. Collision Course, 1 and a white for a sorcery. Choose 1. It deals X damage to target creature, where X is the number of permanents you control that are creatures and/or vehicles, and you can also destroy target artifact. I would be shocked if this isn't white's best common. It's very, very flexible removal. It can target vehicles, which is going to be very important. It can target any artifact, and it can also hit creatures, and the rate at which it hits creatures is good, but not amazing, I would say. This is, running a primarily artifact hate card in this set should be fine. There's going to be spots where you kill creatures, but I think, yeah, I think you'll be pretty happy. The fact that it's dealing damage equal to the number of creatures you have actually makes it kind of bad. I kind of liked it, from a design standpoint, I kind of like that they made this a sorcery. I think that's the right move. Because that's when you should probably be casting this card, is at sorcery speed. So, I don't know. I think this is very good removal in this set, and it will definitely be strong. Daring Mechanic, 2 and a white for a 3/3. You can pay 3 and a white to put a +1/+1 counter on target mount or vehicle. This doesn't really impress me. It's a 3-mana 3/3. Those are kind of whatever. The 4-mana ability is not always on, and when it is, it's not even good. So, not excited. Detention Chariot, 4 white for a 6/6. When it enters, exile target artifact or creature an opponent controls until this vehicle leaves the battlefield, and it is crew 3. And cycling for a single white. So without cycling, I would probably put this down in tier 4, but the cycling's doing a lot for me here. There are several things in this set that care about you having stuff in your graveyard. Not a ton of them in white, but it like white black it kind of comes up. There are some other things. 6 is a lot for this type of effect, and I, you know, I wouldn't like without cycling. I wouldn't like this really at all. I would be very down on it. The cycling, I think, makes up for it. The issue with these when they're expensive, and I may just talk myself into lowering it this year because I certainly it certainly isn't going to take much. Actually, I think I'm just going to do it. I think I'm just going to lower it one tier. Hold on. The thing is, when you cast it, you're kind of just asking to get blown out. You're kind of just saying, "Hey, opponent, I know artifact removal is main deckable, and every color has it except for like blue. Do you want to remove my artifact and like win the game? I paid 6 mana for this thing." Like the Banisher Priest effect gets a lot worse the more expensive the Banisher Priest is, and this is really expensive. But the cycling does make up for that quite a bit in terms of like when it's good, it's still good, but when it's bad, it kind of does nothing. And this, I don't think it really solves all those problems, and as a result, I put it back in tier 3. But I still think it's decent. Gallant Strike. 1 and a white for an instant. Destroy target creature with toughness 4 or greater and cycling for 2. Colorless mana. Yeah, this looks like great. Doesn't always hit the things that you want. This is worse than it looks, I think, in a lot of spots. So maybe don't get too excited, but I do think you're going to main deck this every time. Again, cycling helps out a lot. White cares less about cycling than blue and red, so maybe you could do some sort of Jeskai thing, and then this is actually better, but you can have too many of these, and, you know. Glory Heath Lynx. 1 and a white for a 2/3 with lifelink. It is a mount. When this creature attacks while saddled, search your library for a basic plains card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. Saddle for 2. Yeah, this card's just an absolute menace. 2/3 lifelinker for 2 is already really strong, like already almost a tier 2 card. Maybe even just gets there. It just being a mount, even at all, is very powerful. It's not hard to saddle it. It's only 2, and you're drawing a card every time this gets to have a good attack. You draw a card, which I don't know about you. That's pretty strong, man. That's a pretty strong thing to have on your creature. So this is probably one of the best cards. Like, this is just going to be one of the best cards in the set. I would be shocked if it's not in the top 20 cards in the set. I think it's going to be up there. Guardian Sunmare. 3 white for a 5/5 with ward 2. It's a mount. When this creature attacks while saddled, search your library for a non-land permanent card with mana value 3 or less, put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle. So it was originally lower on this card, and I bumped it up because ward 2 on something with 5 toughness is kind of difficult to deal with, and the saddle cost is not as high as it looks. Like, after looking at the set more, I've sort of decided that, yeah, no, saddle 4 is not too bad. It's actually achievable. The ward 2 is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. If it didn't have ward, I would be very low on it. But it gets a lot of value, and it's very unlikely your opponent's going to be able to block this, like, cleanly. So it gets a lot of value. Your opponent's really going to be incentivized to block it or kill it. If they're killing it, they're going to pay 5 mana, and it's not the end of the world. If you go play this, opponent goes kill it, you're like, okay, well, that sucked, but they didn't like time walk me. So I think this is pretty good. I think that this is actually a very powerful triggered ability. So I like it. Guidelight Synergist. 3 and a white for a 0/4 with flying. It gets +1/+0 for each artifact you control, so it starts as a 1/4. We had this card with this exact text Not the exact text, but basically this text in Phyrexia All Will Be One. It was a blue-white signpost that was an 05 instead of an 04. Obviously 5 is a lot more than 4, although in this format there's all the red removal spells deal 5 anyway, so it wouldn't actually matter as much in this set, but it still obviously matters for creature combat. But yeah, this is going to be really big. It starts as a 1/4. If you have 2 artifacts in play, it's a 3/4. That's a decent rate already, and it scales and is just a very, very threatening creature. Your opponent has to kill it. Yeah, I just see this being a very strong 4-drop. Interface Ace. 1 and a white for an 0/4. This creature saddles, mounts, and crews vehicles using its toughness rather than its power. When this creature becomes tapped during your turn, untap it. This ability triggers only once each turn. I don't think this is very good. I think you can play this. It is an artifact, which is nice. It crews and saddles 4. Good. But I think, you do need to be preventing your opponent from getting to max speed. This doesn't really help do that at all. Theoretically, it blocks their 2-drop, but that's, some 2-drops have like on attack abilities. There's other things that get in the way. So I'm not super jazzed about this. I don't think it's completely unplayable, but I don't really like it very much. Leonin Surveyor. 1 and a white for a 2/2 with start your engines. During your turn, this creature has first strike, and at max speed, you can pay 3 and exile this card from your graveyard to draw a card. There's a whole cycle of these where you can, at max speed, exile a card from your graveyard to draw a card at common. This is maybe the best one. The blue one is also good. This one really does a good job of enabling speed because it's really hard to block a first striker on turn 2. It just is. It's just hard to do. So, your opponents aren't really going to want to, your opponents are going to have to make some bad blocks that enables all your combat tricks. I like this 2-drop a lot. I don't think it's premium by any means, but, this is going to be one of the better max speed enablers in white, I would think. Other than creatures with flying. Because it just, just gets in and hits once a turn, and this one starting your engines is very good. And I think this card's going to be a solid role player in white. Similarly, Light Shield Parry, single white mana for an instant. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn, and you can cycle it for 2 colorless. This is great. Combat tricks with flexibility to be something, to draw some other card from your deck. Very solid. This one, yeah, it's just, it's a little light on the rate, right? 1 mana +2/+2. That's good. It's kind of what you expect, but it's not excellent. It doesn't blow you away. So just the flexibility this offers is good, and you're going to put it in your deck, but I don't think you're going to be, you can have too many of them, which is what I'm saying. Light Wheel Enhancements. Single white mana for an enchantment aura. It can enchant a creature or vehicle with start your engines. Enchanted permanent gets +1/+1 and has vigilance, and at max speed you can cast this card from your graveyard. So we've seen cards like this before. Phalanx Tactics comes to mind. It's kind of a good comp for this. The fact that you just get infinite, you turn on max speed and you just get infinite value. All your creatures are just going to be a little bigger. That's really significant. That's one of those things that I think looks really small, but I'm kind of a big believer in this card. I think this card is very powerful. It starts your engines on an enchantment that's 1 mana. It enables attacks, and it gets you value over the course of the game. It's just, it's not Rancor, but, I mean, man, sure does. Turning on speed is something that is going to be doable. It's going to be really important. I think speed is the most important thing in this format. I think it's the thing that matters the most. So cards that start your engines and care about being at max speed and help you do that, those I think are going to be your level 1 best things to be doing, because you just get so much more rate once you have max speed as opposed to not having it. And this card helps you do everything associated with speed. It helps you block with vigilance. It helps you attack with getting +1/+1, and it helps get you value in the late game. once you've already reached max speed. So I really like this card. Lotus Guard Disciple. 2 and a white for a 2/2 with flying. When this creature enters, target creature or vehicle gains lifelink and indestructible until end of turn. So this card is like appealing, but I think at the end of the day, it's just going to come up short. Giving something like forcing another creature to have to attack for you instead of having your 3-drop be functional by itself is kind of bad. And when this breaks, it does nothing. It's a 3-mana 2/2 flyer. That's just really horrendous. When it, in its best case scenario, is you gain 5 life and maybe get in. Like that's really good. That's great. But your opponent can always chump and just turn it into a just gain 5 deal, like kill their 1/1. It's like, is that even good? It's okay, but I don't think this is going to do what you want as much of the time as you want it to be good. It also doesn't crew anything ever, which is bad. It's a 2 power, it's kind of small, so no types either. I'm just not a huge fan of this. Nesting Bot. 1 white mana for a 1/1 with Start Your Engines. When this creature dies, create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token, and at max speed it gets +1/+0. Kind of a tame max speed payoff, which is fine because you have Start Your Engines on your 1-drop, which is great. You're going to be very happy about that. Starting your engines on 1 is just excellent. It just means that anytime you deal damage to your opponent, you're getting closer to max speed, and obviously the faster you do that. Starting your engines on 1 and starting it on 2 is fairly similar. There's not that much of a difference, like gameplay-wise, because unless your 1-drop doesn't have haste, so it's not going to be getting in. But because like you could play a 1-drop and then on turn 2 start your engines, and that's the same as effectively starting them on 1. But whatever, I digress. This is quite nice, and I can't imagine this not being very, very strong. Perilous Snare. 2 and a white for an artifact with Start Your Engines. When this artifact enters, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until this leaves the battlefield. At max speed, you can tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature or vehicle you control. Activate only as a sorcery. This is a great speed payoff. You can just remove any creature, like you just remove their 3-drop, start your engines, get to speed 2 on turn 3. Very, very simple to do. But it's just this is just sick. Your opponent, obviously, there's a lot of artifact hate in this set, and your opponent's gonna blow this up like a lot of the time. But sometimes they won't, and they still have to. You still are trading 1 for 1 when they do that, and you might, if you're at max speed already, you're getting a +1/+1 counter out of the deal too in the mid game. I think it's just strong, just a very strong removal spell. Pride of the Road. 3 and a white for a 2/5 with Vigilance and Start Your Engines. At max speed, at the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature or vehicle you control gains double strike until end of turn. I should up this. I for some reason thought this cost 5 mana. It doesn't. It costs 4. That's a lot less of a problem. This costs 4 mana. But obviously it doesn't, like, when it, when you're not at max speed, this is a 4 mana 2/5 Vigilance, which is really bad. But when you're at max speed, obviously it's great. It really does do nothing. No, actually, I'm going to leave it down here. It's probably too hot of a take. It's probably just wrong. But, like, okay, so, like, on turn 4, this doesn't help you attack at all. It doesn't do anything. It just sits there. And your opponent can kill it or not kill it. Yeah, actually, I'm actually just going to leave this here. The stats aren't bad for a 4-drop, and Vigilance isn't terrible. But your opponent's going to be able to block pretty easily on this, I would think. Yeah. And has no ETB. I mean, I guess it has Start Your Engines, but if your engines aren't started by turn 4, you're already pretty sad. So we leave it in tier 4. We leave it as a hot take and maybe be wrong, and that's okay. Ride's End. 4 and a white. For an instant, the spell costs 3 less to cast if it targets a tapped permanent. Exile target creature or vehicle. Exile, of course, is very relevant. This is strong. We finally have reached the point where we can have this effect, on this level of power level of card, and it's good. It's the reason it's in tier 3 is that it's not for every deck. Your aggressive white decks, which are going to be, your best white decks, at least early in the format, are probably not going to want this. But in your slower white decks, of course, it's excellent. Even in your aggressive white decks, it's not terrible. But I mean, hitting vehicles and creatures is really important. And actually, you know what? I think I'm just gonna bump it up because although it is not, although it is a situational card, like right, it's not for every white deck, right? But I could see myself take this early and be like, yeah, I can play a slower white deck. I got this really efficient removal spell. That's an instant and it can target vehicles, and I think that's just really strong, the flexibility that it offers. Might be moving too high though. Roadside Assistance. 2 and a white for a enchantment aura, enchant creature or vehicle. When this aura enters, create a 1/1 colorless pilot token. With this token, saddles, mounts, and cruise vehicles as though power were 2 greater. Enchanted permanent gets +1/+1 and has a lifelink. Looks good to me. In a lot of spots, you can put this on a vehicle and then crew the vehicle with the token you just created, and then attack with a lifelinking like 4/4 vehicle. These type of things actually make me want to go change my rating on that flying vehicle, because that thing, you could just put this on that, and then you're really doing it. Yeah, actually, I'm gonna do something very rare, very rare move. I have, as a result of this card existing and a bunch of other cards existing, I'm actually gonna move this up to tier 2, back up to tier 2. I just think of vigilance. Just the more keywords are on your vehicle, you're just gonna be happy to have a vehicle with keywords on it, because there's so many ways to enhance it and get counters and do stuff, and you really just want to have a vehicle and play it to have all your synergies work. So I think this is actually much better than I originally when I re-rated it. Okay, all the way back down here. Okay, and yeah, so this card is single-handedly buffed the other card, because it's a very powerful effect. Lifelink is super strong on these, and just getting to crew your thing immediately is great. Salvation Engine. 4 and a white for a 6/10. Other artifact, it's a vehicle. Other artifact creatures you control get +2/+2. Whenever this vehicle attacks, return up to 1 target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So we just had Dictate of Heliod in Pioneer Masters, and that card is 5 mana. Now it has Flash. Flash is good, and it's enchantment and it hits every creature. But a lot of white's good creatures are artifacts, and it works with all the vehicles, and it's huge. Yes, Crew 6 is kind of whatever, but I mean, you're gonna be able to get your artifacts back. I think this is great. The thing that this suffers from is enters the battlefield at 5 mana. Opponent has an artifact to kill spell. This just dies. That's kind of the thing that we're worried about in terms of grading it tier 1 as opposed to tier 2. And I could totally see it just being like a little worse, because it is 5 mana and doesn't have an ETB necessarily, but it does, if you got artifact creatures, this does have an ETB, right? So yeah, I think this will be pretty good. Sky Seer's Chariot. 1 and a white for a 3/3 vehicle with flying. When this vehicle enters, choose a non-land card name. Activated abilities of sources with the chosen name cost 2 more to activate, and it has crew 2. Just a solid 2 mana 3/3 flying vehicles with crew 2 is a good rate in this set. We just talked about, you can do this, it's a rare, but you can do the sick curve out of this into the uncommon, and you're off and running. You got a 4/4 flying vehicle with lifelink, and you're gonna be really far ahead in that game. So this card, just a good rate. Spectacular Pileup. 3 white for a sorcery. All creatures and vehicles lose indestructible until end of turn, then destroy all creatures and vehicles, and you can cycle it for 2 colorless mana. This looks like a really good Wrath to me. This looks like one of the better Wraths. It's obviously 5 instead of 4, but I mean, everything loses indestructible. There are a couple of tricks that do indestructible. It hits all vehicles and creatures, and when it's like, the great thing about this Wrath is you can just play to the board and cycle it, and that's really what I need. That's what I need to want to play a Wrath, is like my Wrath is not just like dead when I draw it and I have a bunch of creatures on board. This is not that, and I think it's really good as a result. It could even be tier 1. You could convince me. I'm not usually a Wrath enjoyer. I usually don't like them. I don't like playing with them in my deck. They make me feel bad for developing my board state, which I don't like. So I usually not a huge fan, but I think this one piques my interest. This one looks good to me. Spot Cycle Scouter. 1 and a white for a 3/2. When this vehicle enters Scry 2, and it has Crew 1. So this is quite good. This is a nice, you're getting a vehicle. I don't think it's a busted 2, like, is it an amazing, amazing 2-drop? I don't think so. You kind of can have too many of these. Like if you have your third one of these, or is that too much? Maybe not. Maybe just Scry 2 is enough to whatever, and your 3 is probably fine. You can say this is your 2-drop, but then it can't block. The problem is, one of the issues with this card is you're on the draw. You play this as your 2-drop. Your opponent has their 2-drop in play. They start their speed off on turn 3 and then attack you, and you've already lost. Like, they're already at 2 speed. They only need 2 more hits to get you. And on turn 3, it's not really going to be able to attack well. Like, this just kind of doesn't line up well with the format is kind of my concern. My concern with this is, on turn 2, this doesn't actually line up that well. Like, it doesn't block on turn 3. It doesn't really, it can attack, but it doesn't attack well. It's a 3/2, and you crewed it, so you're actually leaving yourself vulnerable to deal 3 damage, and your opponent can just have good blocks sometimes. Like, your opponent has creatures in play sometimes. So that is a sort of a major concern. It is an artifact. It matters. I think this is not going to be one of the best 2-drops in the set, but I think you're going to play it in almost all of your decks. It's a good 2, but not as good of a 2 as it may look. The Scry is really helpful. Without the Scry, I would be completely off this. The Scry is really buoying it. It would be a lot lower without the Scry. But it is not. Do not get it twisted. This is not like a true 2-drop unless you have a lot of 1-drops in your deck. Sundial Dawn Tyrant, 1 and a white for a 3/3. So there's several of these vanilla creatures in this set. There's like a sub-theme about it. I don't know why. I don't know why. Whatever. This one's probably the best of them. It is a 2-mana 3/3. 2-mana 3/3 is pretty big. We've seen 2-mana 3/3s be in limited before. We had one that was a Gruul not so long ago. This one's also an artifact. That card was good. This card's going to be good. Swiftwing Assailant. 3 and a white for a 3/3 flying. With start your engines and max speed, this creature gets +0/+1 and has vigilance. If they just printed a 4-mana 3/4 flying vigilance, I don't act like that card would be goodish. It would be good. We had Angel of Finality and Foundations. That card was good. It didn't have vigilance, but it exiled a graveyard, which is it a wash? Maybe, I don't know. It's probably better to have vigilance on average. So this is good if you're at max speed, but it doesn't help you do that, and it's just not. I would be shocked if I play this. Tune Up. 3 and a white for a sorcery. Return target artifact card from your graveyard to the battlefield. If it's a vehicle, it becomes an artifact creature. There are some things that work with this, but on average it's going to be too situational for you to really want. There's just like better ways to do this, and you don't need to do this. You could just find power elsewhere. Unswerving Sloth. 3 white for a 5/5. It's a mount. Whenever this creature attacks while saddled, it gains indestructible until end of turn. Untap all creatures you control. So, and it has saddle for 4. So you can saddle it with all your creatures, attack with this, untap your creatures. Did you accomplish anything? No, you did not accomplish anything. You made a 5/5 indestructible attack. Okay, great. One of the really bad case scenarios. Now, is it so bad? Is this a real bad case scenario? No, it's not. Because like you can saddle your guy, and like just don't saddle this into open mana if you are tapped out. Just don't do it. It's very easy to not do it. But if you do it, you are risking getting completely obliterated because they could just cast a removal spell on it and then it just dies before it gets to attack, which is not very good for you. Even when this like gets there, like this just there's so many like bounce and removal spells in the set. I don't think this is very good. I would rather play the common 5-drop every time. The vehicle that makes a 1/1. That card is definitely better than this card. Like in I think every deck. So for that reason, I don't really like this very much. Valor's Flagship. 4 white, white, white for a 7/7 vehicle with flying first strike and lifelink. It has crew 3 and cycling for X2 and a white. When you cycle this card, create X1/1 colorless pilot creature tokens with the pilot text on it. Yeah, this is good. It's definitely good. It has cycling. If the vehicle is in play, it's great. I've talked a little bit about how cards that are just artifacts with no ETBs, there's concerns. I have concerns. But the upside when it works is very strong. This is the thing, like, if you want to do this is kind of like you get it? Like, do you get it? Like, that's the thing. Like, you can do it. You can win the game on turn 4. So, like congrats. Like, if you you know, like, whoa, wow, you know what I mean? So that is a thing you can do. Voyager Glide Car. Single white mana 4/a 2/3 vehicle. When this vehicle enters, scry 1. Tap 3 other untapped creatures you control. Until end of turn, this vehicle becomes an artifact creature and gains flying. Put a +1/+1 counter on it. Crew 1. So this is very similar to the card we have legal in Standard that I forget the name of at the moment from LCI. That card was insane. It was insane in Limited. It is insane. It is good in Standard. I don't know if it still is, but it was for a while. This is better than that card in Limited in most spots. Nah, that's not true. It's kind of true. Because this one only works with creatures, so it's less good. Because the set isn't as go widey. There's a bunch of tokens, like the pilot tokens, but that's kind of it. But yeah, this just scries 1. It's a vehicle on turn 1. You can just crew it. Like, you can also just crew this for 1, and it's a 2/3 vehicle. That's pretty good. That's very solid. And you know, this is just going to be very impactful for the entire game. You can also, on your opponent's turn, like your opponent, like you have 3 creatures, they have 3 creatures. There's a board stall. They pass. You just activate this, put a counter on it for 0 mana. Like, that's strong. That's a strong thing to do. Like, that's pretty good. I don't know about you. That sounds like a card that I want in my deck. And the last white card, Voyager Quick Welder. 2 and a white for a 2/4. It's an artifact. Artifact spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Looks pretty solid. I mean, a 3 mana 2/4 is not a good body. You know, it's bad, like actively bad, but there's so many artifacts in the set that I think your opponent is going to be pretty sad if they can't deal with this. Like, you can leave it alive, and it doesn't have an ETB, and so it just dies for removal, but it's going to eat a fairly sizable removal spell or an artifact removal spell, which you're actually probably pretty happy with. This eats your opponent's destroy an artifact card. You're probably pretty happy, right? Yes, you went down on mana, but they destroyed this instead of the thing that's going to be powerful, but you know, making 50% of your spells 1 cheaper is kind of decent. It's pretty good. Usually these type of effects aren't very good because they don't hit enough. There's not enough critical mass, but there's a lot of artifacts in the set. So, yeah, and that's it. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, there's other set review content available for Aetherdrift, and I will see you next time.